So what's your take on the iPad 2? Is it evolutionary? Is it revolutionary?
In some ways I think it depends on your perspective. If you're coming to the iPad 2 from owning the original iPad, it really is just a kind of a marginal change. They added the cameras, but for the, you think that there are only 15 million people at this point who have bought an iPad. There are millions and millions and millions of people who are coming to the iPad or a touchscreen tablet device for the first time. And to them, even if they're certainly aware of the iPad at this point, I do think once you get these devices in your hands, it is revolutionary, because it's revolutionary in comparison to the devices that people are used to using as computers, which is namely a desktop or a laptop computer. Here's where the iPad, whether you're talking about the first version of the iPad 2,
Sure.
really changes your whole relationship to a computer.
I'm also interested in what you think about that whole post-PC spin. Is that just an Apple-generated marketing phrase? Or is it? Are they actually onto something?
It's marketing, but I think they really are. I think first of all, you think about the PC, the average PC, whether it's a desktop or a laptop, in the hands of the average consumer is a vastly overpowered, more complex machine. What do most people do? Not the hardcore O'Reilly crowd, but most people. They do email, they browse the web, they like to look at pictures, and now increasingly play with apps. You don't need a PC to do that. And in fact, the downside of a PC is actually severalfold. One is that there's a level of complexity that you can quickly get yourself into, whether you're talking about a Windows machine or a Mac machine. The whole directory structure and files and all the trouble you can cause for yourself. And then there's the issue of ergonomics, right? When you're talking about a PC, again, whatever it's a desktop, laptop, you're sitting in a chair, the screen is vertical to you, you're in work mode, you're in lean forward mode. As soon as you start talking about an iPad, you're in lean back mode, and that becomes a different kind of relationship that you have with your computer. And then you introduce the touchscreen relationship, and the fact that now you no longer have to sort of channel your requests through either a keyboard or a mouse, but you can literally touch, whether it's, swiping through photos, playing Angry Birds, manipulating rows in a spreadsheet. It nudges forward incrementally, or reduces incrementally, I should say, the distance between the person and the stuff that they want to do. So I really do think that this notion of a post-PC era that we're starting to enter is absolutely right on. And it's not, of course, just going to be Apple. It's going to be Apple, all its competitors, and tablet devices and smartphones. So I think if you put those two kinds of devices together, and you really are going to start having people spending less time in front of the PC, and we're already starting to see it in sales figures. The sales of PCs are just starting to go down or grow as less quickly as they used to.
Do you think we'll get to the point where we stop trading specifications? That seemed to be a big part of the whole post-PC thing. Is, it's not about specs. It's not about how many cores are in this thing. It's about the experience.
Well, I do. I think it's very interesting that Apple very specifically chose not to advertise or publicize in any way things like how much RAM the computer has. And knowing, Apple knows that it's trivial to find out how much RAM. So it's a marketing decision that the story that they want to tell about the iPad is not about the specifications, it's about the experience. And most people, it actually increases their anxiety level when they run into terms like RAM and gigahertz. This doesn't mean they're idiots, they just don't have the vocabulary and the background and the context to know what it means to have a 1 gigahertz processor, or what the difference between 256 megabytes of RAM and a gig, So by consciously choosing to leave that stuff out, I think Apple is really trying to send this message, and I think they're being pretty successful, send this message that here's a device that you will be able to use instantly. You can turn it on, you don't have to wait for a minute, you turn it on instantly, you launch these apps, they launch instantly, and you don't have to worry about what's under the hood.
I find it striking the difference in advertising between Android devices and iPad advertising. Right. You watch the Android stuff, you're getting in a jet, right? And it's got all these specs, and you're doing all this stuff, and the iPad is more, but it's a completely different market.
Absolutely, and I'm convinced that Android is, it's here to stay and will be successful in its own way, but I think that they're targeting a much narrower slice of the overall pie of people who will eventually be using touchscreen tablet devices. Yeah. I think there's more people out there who identify with, I'm sitting on a couch and I want to read ebooks and do email and browse the web, than there are with people who either want a jet-powered computing experience or the ability to root their device and hack it.
Sure. So last question I have for you, it's a little bit along the same lines. What do other companies need to do, tablet competitors that is, to realistically compete with the iPad?
Well, it's a tough challenge. I mean, I think it starts with the app ecosystem, that Apple now is at the point where they can legitimately say, we have 65,000 plus iPad apps specifically designed for the iPad. What's the number on the Android side? By an article that I read this morning, something around a dozen. There are apps that will run on an Android app, but they're blown up from the smartphone. So encouraging developers to create more apps, I think, is a big one. And then, I don't know, I have a very hard time envisioning a scenario a year from now, if we have this same discussion, where Apple doesn't own 70% of the tablet market. So I think what these competitors need to do is think about what's important to that 30% of the audience that remains, and I think things like openness and speed and feature listings, those are important, so they need to keep doing things like that, but they got to start getting it right. There are a lot of competitors who are making a big deal about Flash on the tablet, on the Zoom, but it ships and it's not ready. So they got to get that stuff right.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.